Time for the look ahead. Welcome back to The Fix with me, Karima Brown. And of course, now it's time for our look ahead. Let's get straight to it. Welcome to my panel. We've got the Business Days, Teto Makluane. Good evening. Welcome to the program.
Good evening, Karima.
And then, of course, we've got Yanyan Uber in Cape Town. Good evening, Yanyan. Good to speak to you again. It's been a long time.
Good evening, Karima. Always lovely to speak to you as well.
And of course, we've got Peter Bruce, Sunday Times columnist, with us here this evening. Now, we've got quite a lot of stories that are obviously going to be impacting what is going to be going on, in the coming weeks. One of the issues, Teto, that you've been covering is, of course, these wage negotiations at the power utility Eskom. We know that Eskom has moved considerably from 0% to about 7.5%. But the unions are not budging. They now want Minister Nene, the finance minister, around. They want Pravin Gordhan around. Do you think that's going to unlock the impasse?
Well, the idea behind wanting to meet with the ministers instead of only with the Eskom management is that they will be able to get a direct mandate, because the Eskom board, of course, has to consult its shareholder as well, being government. And they feel that they will somehow just get a direct engagement with the powers that be to find out if indeed these monies that they're demanding can be afforded. But we have seen the response, of course, from the finance minister's office, saying that if you do come here, please do come, but as taxpayers and as unionists. And if you do come as taxpayers, you're going to have to tell all of us where the money is going to come from. And you would have to do that knowing the kind of constraints we have on the fiscus, and knowing, of course, that there is absolutely no money to bail out Eskom in this particular instance.
Peter, let me bring you in here. I mean, the headline of the City Press this week says, "I'm not weak." And of course, it refers to the question of the kneeling and the Zulu king. But the other issue, of course, that faces Cyril Ramaphosa's government is whether or not he can get Eskom right. The point that Teto's making here about the unions now wanting to engage the cabinet ministers of Mr. Ramaphosa, do you think this is going to be the standing, the issue on which he stands or fall one way or the other, at least for the rating agencies?
I don't know. Look, there is the agencies will be rating South Africa again in 3 or 4 months, I think, Teto. I'm not so sure. But there's something that makes me really uneasy about somebody saying to me, let's say I was the editor of a newspaper and Teto was the Labour editor, and I was negotiating her salary, and she would say, "No, I'm not going to talk to you. I want to talk to the management." It's kind of, and if the management then agrees to talk to you, as it might all be very funny saying, "Well, wear two hats when you come, one as taxpayer, one as unions." But in Nene and Pravin Gordhan actually sit down with these guys and negotiate, they change everything. And if they set a precedent that I promise you now, they'll be very, very sorry about in the future.
Absolutely. Yanya, let me bring you in here. I mean, this is a direct political move on the part of the unions, isn't it? I mean, they're not just interested in talking wages at, the level of the board and management. They want to talk politics and the future of state-owned companies.
Quite right, and I think that the point here is that we see a credibility gap between the Eskom management and these unions, and it's the credibility gap that government needs to worry about. Clearly, the unions do not trust the Eskom management to negotiate with them. But I agree with Peter, it would set a precedent which would just be absolutely impossible to hold.
Now, Teto, as a final question just on this matter, if Pravin and Nene does not sit down with these unions, what do you think is going to happen? Do you think everything is just going to fall flat? And will the instruction from Cabinet be go and see what you can do?
Karima, we must remember that Gordhan has already intervened in these talks. He has already done that. And to a certain degree, he has given the unions the power to call the shots, because he's the one who mandated the Eskom management to go and move from the 0% increase. So to a certain extent, when the Eskom management says, we will meet these increases, but we'll have to cut on operational costs, they're saying that with sort of that knowledge in the background to say that, but we were encouraged to move from this position. And by virtue of that, government has already put its foot in the negotiations.
Yeah.
And how it moves from this point forth, of course, will be determined on how good negotiators they are.
Yeah.
And the unions have already proven that they've put them in a corner. They've proven what can happen in just a week of not even a formal strike or a union-sanctioned strike, just labor unrest.
Yeah.
They've shut the country down, and they've proven that we hold the power. So to some degree, the union, the Eskom rather, and government have made a lot of bad moves in this journey. And like Peter said, it will tell a lot about the president's own will to sort out this kind of issue and the kind of leverage he would want to give labor in terms of dictating not only labor matters and wages, but policy direction, because they would be pretty much setting up Eskom for demise if they do get the kind of 8% and the 12% ones of bonuses that they're demanding.
Absolutely, and of course this is the key issue. Yan, the other big question that's going to be dominating discussions, and of course certainly the fate of the Democratic Alliance, is of course this important meeting that is being held over the weekend. One of the issues that is being discussed is of course what to do with Patricia de Lille. She's not going to go away quietly. You've got intimate knowledge of the Democratic Alliance and how it works. What are you hearing from your sources inside that meeting? What is going to happen next? What is the DA's next move?
So the meeting that took place in Johannesburg this weekend was that of the Federal Council of the DA. It is a large grouping of people, and I think it dealt with three main issues. Patricia de Lille did come up. I didn't see that reported much in the newspapers, but it did come up, and there was an effort from some of the Western Cape leadership of the party, not the top leadership in the province, but some of the others, to at least not have any further motions of no confidence. Unfortunately for them, one has already been tabled by a councillor called Marianne Nieuwoud here in Cape Town. So what I understand is that Mmusi Maimane now wants to handle the whole situation by himself, and he will be taking the leadership on that issue.
Now, the whole question of Mmusi Maimane versus James Salfpeter is, of course, an issue. Many people argue that Mmusi is a nominal leader. The man with the real power is James Salf. There's a really interesting story in the Sunday Times here. Just reflect for us on what you think the role of James Salf is, and whether he's going to allow Mmusi to actually provide leadership on the Patricia matter.
Yeah, look, it's very difficult to know where the fault lines are inside the DA, and you have. You know, the moment you write something critical about the DA, they all sort of join up and have a go at you, right?
Yeah, don't worry.
But if you leave them to themselves, left to themselves, the DA is really internally quite a nasty place to be, I suspect. And it's certainly a much nastier place to be than it was when Helen Zille was there, and she's been marginalised now, probably her own fault, but whatever. What's replaced her is a series of power blocks, I think, inside the party.
That's not gelling.
That's not gelling right. Mmusi was given a bit of a break. He didn't take the gap, I don't think, that he should have when she was made leader. He tried to build unity. Any party leader would. It was natural to do. But these guys, the old blood in there, the James Selfs, and and there are people whose names we don't even know in the DA who are the chief executive, for God's sakes, or the people who you simply never see, and they are extremely powerful, and they decide who does what. The story in the Sunday Times is so revealing today, because it's about how James Self might this weekend have been trying to protect his position. He protects his position, according to the Sunday Times, which seems well informed on the matter, by suggesting that provincial presidents of the DA get more power to select candidates for the election. You would have thought they would have already had that power, huh?
Yes.
But under James Self so far they haven't. Suddenly he sees it as an opportunity to protect, to build defences for himself. What is he defending himself from? He's defending himself from people who've had a look at the way he, James, mainly, has driven the Patricia de Lille matter, and he's gotten the party into the dwang, basically. They are losing support. It's measurable on the street. And this is why Mmusi Maimane is now talking about taking everything onto his own shoulders. And I think James Self is now probably weak enough in the party for Mmusi to do that, but we'll see.
Yan, you have a good idea of the balance of power in the Democratic Alliance. Will those who have historically sided with James and been driving the strategy with James actually understand that it's a lost cause and that his strategy hasn't actually worked and that Mmusi ought to be given a chance?
Well, it's a good question whether that strategy has worked or not. I think what we are seeing is that 34 members of the Federal Council signed a sort of a petition in which they were against this larger role for the provincial leadership in choosing the candidates. It's actually a proxy battle. It's not an important issue at all. Quite frankly, any provincial leader worth his salt can already control the process. So I think it's basically just a shot across the bow for James Self to say, listen, you were elected unopposed, but we're watching you.
Now, Teto, Patricia de Lille, I mean, she is a fighter. She has, drawn this matter out for as long as she can. She's going to go to court. She wants the Steenhuisen report. What do you think her ultimate kind of long play is? Is she, I mean, she didn't want to answer the question that you see Bismarck put to her on his show about, will you campaign for the DA? Do you think that's going to be the big test for Patricia?
I think that is. And in analyzing her, I think it's always safer to use her own words. She does have intentions of eventually leaving the party. She's already said that, and that's why she got into trouble in the first place. Now, the question is, when that happens, of course, she wants to do that in her own terms, and she wants that particular report in order to vindicate herself, or so she says. Now, if you do have the kind of wrangles that you have within the DA leading up to the national elections, and you have this particular leader of the Cape Town Metro who is unable to fully endorse her own party in public because her party has put her through so much as is, it's going to be quite interesting to see, and she will indeed have to make that call much earlier than that eventuality when she does resign. Yeah. So I do believe that indeed the national elections campaigning period will be a big test of whether she's still in it or not.
There's, of course, not a single party that doesn't have issues.
No, absolutely.
You know, I mean, I want to come back to the City Press headline, guys. I'm not weak. Peter, this is, of course, Cyril Ramaphosa speaking to journalists on the sidelines of his trip to Saudi Arabia. And, of course, it's got everything to do with, the perception that he had gone to bow and give basically in to the Zulu king. Do you think that he's convincing?
Look, that weak thing has been dogging him from day one, basically. You know, there's going to Goodwill Zwelithini, and did he bow? Did he apologize? We don't know. We weren't
did he show him some cattle?
There are no photographs of any of this stuff. So his problem is, and he admits it in the story. The story is in all the papers today. He's got any political leader. You just have to have your priority is always going to be party unity.
Yeah.
I don't care who you are. Theresa May's doing it in Britain. That's why Brexit exists. Donald Trump will do it in the States. Xi Jinping does it big time in China. It's the law. So party unity is an absolutely vital thing. And if Cyril doesn't do that first before he does anything else, he will end up crashing and burning. He knows that. So we have to give him a break.
Space.
I reckon you've got to give him a break and say, go for it. You've got to keep your party together. We understand, there might be some frustrations. There's some things you can do on your own. Try to make a little list, of things that you can do tomorrow without asking anybody. I mean, I feel sorry for him. He's in a terrible position.
Yan, 30 seconds. Do you think that the president ought to be given an opportunity to consolidate himself and his position in the governing party?
Well, he needs to create that opportunity, and his biggest problem is that he made a Faustian pact with the deputy president, who is an interesting fellow if you look at his history in Mpumalanga. So it's going to be pretty rough for the president to carry his message of clean governance while he's surrounded by the people he's surrounded by.
Well, that is it. Of course, Yan, thank you so very much. That's Yan Uber speaking to us from Cape Town. Teto, thank you so much for coming in and providing insight for us on that strike. And, of course, up ahead in the fix today still, the cool stuff.